Chapter 4. By the time Michael got to the party on Saturday evening, it seemed that most of the guests had already arrived. There weren't too many people, maybe a dozen or so, and most of them seemed too preoccupied with what Kate and Gavin had done with the apartment to notice the newcomer. The apartment really did look nice. He suspected all thanks to Kate and her flair for decorating. Gavin came to greet him first. Michael shook his hand and wished him a happy birthday, and Gavin thanked him for coming and again for all his help the week prior. Although he still wasn't a shining example of perfect health, there seemed to be a little bit more life in Gavin's eyes. Before he could think too much on it, Kate appeared looking bright and lovely in a lime green summer dress and blue sandals.
"Michael," she smiled. "I'm so glad you came."
"Thanks for inviting me. The apartment looks great."
"Thank you," she beamed. "Can I get you anything to drink? We have more than water and Gatorade now."
Okay," Michael grinned.
"Well, help yourself to anything. We have a bunch of snacks and a couple of our friends are already down by the pool. In fact, the rest of us will probably head down there in a few minutes. I really only wanted people to meet up here so they could see the new apartment, but now that everyone's seen it, I'm ready to swim."
Michael was relieved. He was beginning to feel kind of dorky in his tropical-themed swim trunks and orange polo shirt.
Well, who is this?"
A woman decked out in a bright magenta sundress covered with tiny sequined flowers and magenta heels to match appeared next to Kate. She brought with her a cloud of perfume so thick that Michael had to hold his breath to keep from coughing.
"Val, this is our new neighbor, Michael," Kate answered. "Michael, this is my boss and very good friend, Valerie."
"Nice to meet you." Michael shook her hand and tried his best not to inhale.
"Very nice indeed,"
Val grinned. To Kate, she muttered very indiscreetly,
"You were right, sweetie. He is cute."
Michael was sure his cheeks were blushing as vividly as Kate's as she chuckled nervously.
"Okay, Val. Thank you."
Valerie winked and flounced off to flirt with Gavin and his friends.
"So that's Val,"
Kate announced, still rather pink in the cheeks. "She seems nice," Michael replied with a sheepish smile.
"Well, she's definitely not shy," Kate responded. "And on that note, I think I'm going to start herding everyone down to the pool."
"Before we go, would you mind if I used your bathroom?" Michael asked.
"Not at all. Just pretend that it's not messy. Gavin seems to think that shoving stuff to one side of the counter is the same thing as cleaning."
Knowing that the only bathroom in the apartment connected to Gavin's bedroom, Michael slipped inside and waited until the noise and chatter died down. Once he was certain the apartment was empty, he opened the door to Gavin's room and looked around. The room was dark, but the light from the bathroom spilled through the open door just enough to illuminate every corner. No ghost. "Looking for something?" The voice made Michael jump. He whirled around and found himself face to face with Gavin. "Sorry, Michael racked his brain for an excuse that would explain why he'd just been caught snooping around his neighbor's bedroom. "I thought I heard something in here." Gavin shook his head. "You and Kate." "What about her?" "She's always hearing strange noises. Back in our old apartment, she was convinced she'd hear someone walking around late at night." "But you never heard anything?" "No," Gavin replied simply. "To be honest, I think the break-in traumatized her a lot more than she likes to let on. She always had a crazy imagination. As a kid, she would actually make imaginary friends for herself out of poster board. She'd give them names, hometowns, backstories, birthdays. You name it, she thought of it. I think now, because she imagines things so vividly, she thinks too hard about the break-in and scares herself into believing she hears someone walking around our apartment. But what do I know? I'm not a shrink." "It sounds plausible," Michael agreed, reeling from the revelation that Kate knew, or at least suspected, that someone other than Gavin was living with her in the apartment. The real challenge was going to be working that into a conversation without sounding, well, creepy. "I don't know. I just hope she's okay. She's been through a lot more than I have this year." "She seems happy," Michael told him. "Yeah," Gavin replied listlessly. "Anyway, we should probably head down to the pool before she sends a search and rescue squad to check on us." Down by the pool, Michael and Gavin were greeted by the tantalizing aroma of cheese, pepperoni, and sausage pizza. The sun had almost set, and the sky glowed a deep shade of violet. The lights inside the pool illuminated the entire area, and someone had brought an old 1990s boombox that filled the night air with a popular country song that Michael recognized but couldn't name. "Ugh, this song is awful," Gavin complained loudly. "Someone change it to something good."
"Hey, I love this song,"
Kate, who was already shoulder-deep in the clear blue water, called.
"Besides, it's summer. Summertime is country music time."
"Yeah, well, it's my birthday, and I say it goes," Gavin argued. Kate's face fell into a playful pout.
"You're no fun,"
she quipped before she slipped beneath the restless surface of the pool. About 30 minutes later, everyone was lounging around the pool, eating, drinking, talking, and laughing. By that point, Michael had all but forgotten that he was supposed to be on a mission to find out all he could about the ghost. But, he reasoned with himself, he wasn't there this time. Maybe Michael had been wrong all along. Maybe the ghost hadn't been waging some crazy vendetta against Gavin. Maybe it was just a random haunting, and he had left them for good. Unfortunately, the rational voice in the back of his mind told him that probably wasn't the case. As the evening progressed, Michael found himself in a small group that consisted of a very chlorinated Kate. He tried to pretend he hadn't choked on his soda when she first climbed out of the pool in her dark blue bikini. A girl Gavin used to work with named Tony, her girlfriend Leah, and Gavin's friend Alex, who'd annoyed Michael from the moment he decided to grace them with his presence. "Guys, watch this," he announced, grinning stupidly as he took a seat on the pavement next to Michael. "Hey, Kate, what color is the pool?" "Hilarious, Alex," Kate remarked. "I hope you don't wonder why you go home alone," Tony told Alex, who stared at her like a deer in the headlights. Michael decided then that he liked Tony.
"So, Michael, how about you? Do you have a girlfriend or a boyfriend?"
Leah asked. No, I'm single." He glanced over at Kate, but only for a moment. Out of the corner of his eye, however, he could swear he saw her smile. Later on that evening, everyone gathered around a platter full of cupcakes, throughout which were placed 26 candles, and sang happy birthday to Gavin. "Did you make the cupcakes?" Michael asked Kate as Gavin blew out his candles.
"Actually, Tony and Leah made them. The last time I tried to bake something, half my senior class ended up with food poisoning."
"Yikes."
"Yeah, it wasn't pretty. Fortunately for me, I didn't eat any of it."
Kate grinned. She snatched up 2 cupcakes and handed one to Michael. He followed her to an isolated corner of the pool, where she sat down and dangled her feet in the water. He followed suit.
"I don't want to jinx anything, but I'd say the party's going well. Wouldn't you?"
"Yeah, it's been great," Michael agreed. "Though I'm not sure how I feel about your friend Alex."
"Yeah, he's, out there,"
Kate remarked, glancing over at Alex, who looked like he was trying to balance a beer bottle on his head.
"He's one of Gavin's old college buddies, so I kind of had to invite him."
"You know, Gavin's looking a lot better than he did last week," Michael offered.
"You think so?"
Kate looked hopeful, taking a large bite of her cupcake. Yeah, he really does."
"I hope he's getting better. I don't know what I'd do if anything happened to him."
"You know, I was talking to him up in the apartment. I think he worries about you just as much as you worry about him," Michael said.
"I know. I wish he wouldn't. He doesn't need to worry about me. It's just, ever since the accident, my entire family has treated me like a China doll. Like the slightest thing might break me. Then, of course, with Gavin being sick and the break-in, I feel like they're just waiting for me to keel over," Kate explained.
"I must sound like such a hypocrite to you after the way I fussed over Gavin. You've both had a hard couple of months."
"Yeah. To be honest, they had it a lot worse than I did. I don't even remember the accident."
"You don't?"
"Nope. But my parents and Gavin described it to me in such excruciatingly vivid detail that I might as well remember it."
"What happened?"
"I was driving on a road I drive almost every day, hit a patch of black ice, and drove straight into a tree. Totaled my car and apparently wreaked some pretty serious havoc on the poor tree. I'm just thankful that I drove into it and not oncoming traffic."
"That wouldn't have been good. Not that your accident was good, but it's good that no one else got hurt," Michael rambled.
"Tell me about it. I definitely wouldn't want that on my conscience. She finished her cupcake and licked the remaining frosting off her fingers. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm getting back in the pool. With that, she hopped off the edge of the pool and into the water. Michael watched as she slipped beneath the pale blue waves, only to resurface a few seconds later. Come on, she beckoned. Oh, I'm not much of a swimmer, he told her. You don't have to be a swimmer. This water is 4 feet deep. Yeah, but it's cold. If you don't get in, I'm going to splash you. No, you won't. He shouldn't have tested her. With a swift flip of her hand, Kate sent a shower of chlorine water raining down on Michael, who tried unsuccessfully to shield himself from the droplets. Oh, you asked for it. Michael tossed his shirt aside and heaved himself into the pool. Kate grinned and dove underwater. Before Michael knew it, she was halfway across the pool. I was a lifeguard in college, she explained upon seeing his stunned expression. Before long, several others joined them in the pool. At one point, Gavin ran up to his apartment and reappeared with an old, beat-up volleyball. Michael had only played volleyball once or twice, and never in a pool. His lack of experience became apparent the first time the ball was lobbed to him. He'd leapt out of the way so quickly, a casual observer might have thought he was trying to dodge a bullet. Kate, who seemed wildly amused by his flagrant fear of being hit in the face, turned out to be a regular water volleyball pro. Did you play in high school? Michael asked her after a particularly powerful serve. Nah, I was too artsy to be any good at sports. You seem pretty good to me. It doesn't require a lot of skill to hit a ball over a net. No offense. She grinned playfully. Thanks. Heads up! Someone from the other side of the pool called. Michael looked up just in time to see the ball soaring through the air. Before he could react, the ball hit its target and Kate doubled over, clutching the left side of her face. Kate! Gavin yelled and thrashed his way through the water trying to get to her. Michael placed a hand on her shoulder as blood dribbled down her face and into the pool. Come on, we need to get you out of here, he said. She nodded in reply. Gently, he took her arm and guided her over to the steps. Kate, are you okay? Gavin demanded as Michael wrapped a towel around her shoulders. Yeah, I'm fine, she replied, sounding like she couldn't breathe through her nose. Do I need to call an ambulance? Gavin asked. No, it's just a little nosebleed. I'm fine, she insisted, looking up at her brother. The area around her left eye was red and swollen. See, it's already stopped. It's not your nose that I'm concerned about. By that point, the rest of the party had climbed out of the pool. Tony, who'd hit the ball, was beside herself, apologizing profusely. Don't worry about it, Tony, Kate said. You can't play volleyball without getting pummeled at least once. Kate, I think we need to go to the ER, Gavin told her again. Oh my God, I'm fine. If this had happened 6 months ago, you'd be telling me to suck it up and put some ice on it, which is what I'm going to do now. Clutching the towel close, Kate turned on her heel and marched up to her apartment. Gavin heaved a frustrated sigh and rubbed his forehead. I'll go with her, Michael told him. Thanks, Gavin muttered. By the time Michael made it up to their apartment, Kate was already standing at the kitchen sink with a washcloth full of ice pressed to her eye. Hey, Michael offered. You okay? Yep, Kate answered. Though I might look like the Phantom of the Opera in the morning. I don't think that will happen, Michael told her. I'm really sorry. Why? It wasn't your fault. But I feel like I should have pushed you out of the way, or not been distracting you. Again, it wasn't your fault. It's just something that happens when you play volleyball with people who've been drinking all night. Kate grinned wryly. Besides, if you'd pushed me out of the way, then you'd have been hit, and all that work you put into avoiding it earlier would have been in vain. Not funny, Michael told her, but he laughed nevertheless. Sorry. I'm sure you have a lot of potential to become a great volleyball player. I'm not sensing a lot of sincerity in that sentiment. I'll have to work on that. Kate smirked, removing the washcloth. The swelling around her eye had gone down, but the chill of the ice had left it even redder than before. So, and please don't get upset, but you're sure you don't need to see a doctor? I'm not dizzy, I'm not seeing double, I don't even have a headache. He must not have looked very convinced, because Kate walked over to him and placed a comforting hand on his arm. I promise, If I feel even the slightest bit lightheaded or woozy, I'll go to the doctor straight away. Okay?
Okay, Michael echoed softly, suddenly realizing how very alone they were in the apartment. He cleared his throat, knowing that regardless of how much he liked her, it wouldn't be a good idea to let her get any closer. She must have sensed his reluctance, because she took a few steps back and tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear.
Well, I guess we should get back down to the party. That is, if Gavin hasn't sent everyone home.
Yeah, Michael agreed, cursing his own cowardice for a second time that night. Kate turned from him and walked back into the kitchen to retrieve her makeshift ice pack. Michael ran a hand through his hair, wondering if she wanted him to wait for her. His thoughts were interrupted by the dull thump of what sounded like a tennis ball bouncing off a wall. Acting on instinct, Michael's eyes flew to Gavin's bedroom, where a shadowy silhouette paced anxiously back and forth across the dark room. He was back. Michael should have known his absence was too good to be true. Fortunately, he didn't seem to realize that they were there, or if he did, their presence was of little concern to him. Kate, meanwhile, stared at Michael from the kitchen.
What was that?
She asked. I'm not sure. He hoped she couldn't tell he was lying. Maybe some kids are playing outside?
No, it sounded like it came from in here.
She breezed past him and looked around the living room. You know, maybe the building's foundation is shifting. I know that can cause some, unexplained noises.
Yeah, maybe.
Though she didn't sound entirely convinced. Michael knew this would be the perfect opportunity to press Kate for anything she may have seen or heard. But before he could, the front door swung open and Gavin appeared. Everyone's gone, he announced. How are you feeling, Kate?
Fine.
You don't think you have a concussion? Kate just sighed. Michael took that as his cue to leave. I guess I better go and let you get some rest, he announced.
Thanks for coming,
Kate said. Sure, I had a good time. Happy birthday, Gavin. Thanks, man. Good night, Gavin replied. Feel better, Kate. I mean, I know you don't feel bad, but, you know.
I know.
She smiled, but it seemed oddly forced.
Thanks, Michael.
Right. Well, good night. And with that, he stepped out into the night and walked across the short landing to his apartment, away from the restless, angry spirit, and away from Kate. Chapter 5. Kate couldn't sleep, and for the first time in 10 weeks, it wasn't because she'd been startled awake by some unresolved fear of strangers breaking into her apartment. Tonight, she was just another girl, confused and frustrated over the irrational behavior of the cute boy next door. First, he behaves like a total gentleman, helping them move, listening to her stories, and even showing up for their party. Then he hangs out with her all night, exchanges a cute, nervous glance with her after admitting that he was single, and takes care of her after she was hit by the volleyball. She wasn't the kind to believe that every guy who did a nice thing for her was interested in her, but Michael had seemed, well, interested. That is, until she'd gotten too close. Maybe he was like Trey, the cute guy from high school who would flirt and tease until a girl expressed genuine interest in him. After that, he'd be gone so fast you'd think somebody lit his shoes on fire. But Michael wasn't like that. He wasn't some shameless flirt. He seemed like a nice, down-to-earth kind of guy. Maybe he just wasn't interested in her after all. They really hadn't known each other that long. He probably hadn't meant to lead her on. She'd just mistaken his acts of friendship for something more. She tried to tell herself that it was probably for the best, and that whenever she jumped into a relationship in the past, it never ended well. So why did Michael's subtle rejection leave her feeling small, embarrassed, and a little sad? Hoping to banish Michael Sinclair from her thoughts, she crept out to the dark living room and planted herself in front of the television. Nothing was on, so she began scrolling through Netflix and eventually decided on Cemetery Tours. Even though the show had just wrapped up its second season, Netflix only streamed the first. Kate had already seen every episode, some more than once, but she needed a distraction. And with his handsome, angular face, devil-may-care smile, and muscular physique, she couldn't ask for a better or more beautiful distraction than Luke Rayner. Hours later, she was stirred to consciousness by the sound of someone pacing from the kitchen to the living room and back to the kitchen again. She was lying on the couch facing the TV. The bright glow of the Netflix menu was almost blinding in the pitch darkness of the living room. She must have slept through the entire episode. She could hear the footsteps returning to the living room now. She froze, listening intently, hoping to pinpoint their exact location. "Gavin," she whispered. No answer. The footsteps were much too close now, just a few feet beyond the television. This time, when they reached the living room, they stopped. Kate felt her breath catch in her throat. "Why?" she longed to cry out. "Why are you following me?" Without a second thought, she flew off the couch, right through the spot where the footsteps had stopped, and into Gavin's room. Her brother, usually a heavy sleeper, woke and started to gasp as Kate hastily shut the door behind her. "Kate?" he hissed through the darkness. "Are you all right? Is your head bothering you?" "Gavin, it's here," she whispered frantically. "What?" "It came back. That thing." "Kate." She could hear the aggravation in his voice as he climbed out of bed and shuffled across the room to confront her. "Come on. We talked about this." "Gavin, I know what you're going to say. You told me 1,000,000 times. But Gav, there is something out there," she insisted. Gavin sighed. "Okay." He opened the door and meandered out into the hallway. Kate followed slowly. Gavin flipped on the light switch and looked around the empty apartment. "Anyone here?" he called. "Didn't think so." He turned weary eyes on his sister. "Something was standing right here." She directed him to the spot where the footsteps had stopped. "Did you see it?" "No, but I heard it. Footsteps. Someone was pacing," she told him. Gavin wandered into the living room, where the Netflix menu still wondered whether or not she was going to select another episode of Cemetery Tours. "Were you watching something?" he asked. "I couldn't sleep," she explained. "I wonder why," Gavin remarked, staring at the screen. "You know this is what happens when you watch this crap. It gets into your head and then you start imagining things." "But I wasn't imagining." "Kate, think about it. When did all of this start? After the break-in. Look, I know how much it scared you, but you gotta understand, there's no one in this apartment but us." "What if it's something else?" she demanded. Gavin heaved an exacerbated sigh and ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Ugh, Kate, for the last time, there is no such thing as ghosts." "I think there is." "Where's the proof?" "Watch an episode of Cemetery Tours." "Are you kidding? That show is bogus. There is absolutely nothing scientific about what they do." Actually, that wasn't quite accurate. The 4 investigators, Luke, Gail, Peter, and JT, all used state-of-the-art technology to record the voices of the spirits, to detect changes in electromagnetic energy, and to capture images of shadowy figures and apparitions that might otherwise have remained unseen. "Come on. Even you said you only watch it for that frat boy Luke Snyder," Gavin continued. "Rayner," Kate corrected him. "And he's the reason I started watching. I keep watching because of all the other cool stuff they capture." "That cool stuff is called special effects and CGI. I promise you, I could take a video camera into any old building, shoot an hour of footage, and replicate all their so-called evidence in about 3 hours." "But it's on the Discovery Channel." "What does that have to do with anything?" "The channel that brings us Shark Week would never condone such fraudulence." "How is it that you can spit out a mouthful like that, but you can't even remember that the sky is blue?" Kate couldn't have felt more stricken if he'd slapped her across the face. Gavin's eyes widened as the full impact of what he'd just said came crashing down on him. "Kate, I'm so sorry. I wasn't thinking." "No, it's fine. I'm just being stupid." Kate turned away so he wouldn't see the tears pooling in her eyes. "No, Kate, I'm really tired. I'm just gonna go to bed. I'm sorry I woke you up." And before Gavin could say another word, Kate disappeared into her bedroom, locking the door behind her. For someone who had spent his entire life striving to blend in, shelving books at the public library was an ideal job. Although the hours could be long and the labor strenuous, the atmosphere was quiet and serene, and Michael could easily go unnoticed amongst the rows of laminated covers and faded text. Best of all, he always had more than enough to distract him from the curious whispers of wayward spirits who, every so often, wandered through the aisles. Unfortunately, nothing seemed enough to stop his mind from drifting back to his neighbors across the landing. He hadn't seen or heard from Kate or Gavin since Saturday night, and even though he realized that was probably for the best, it bothered him. Were they all right? Had their ghostly visitor wreaked any more havoc on their lives? He hadn't a clue, and he wished with all his heart that he didn't care so much. He'd never worried about any of his other neighbors, and they'd all suffered the effects of hauntings from the ghosts who'd followed him home. Of course, this time, the haunting was not only personal, it was violent. Michael grabbed a handful of books and stepped up onto the footstool. He was so tall he hardly needed it to reach the top shelf. Still, it kept him from having to strain his body by stretching to place books back in their proper places. Man, it's so quiet in here. Michael was so startled he dropped the books and had to grab a hold of the shelf to keep from toppling off the stool. He whirled around to see Brink in all his plaid 90s-style glory, lounging against a shelf and staring at the books as though they had all been handcrafted by aliens. "Brink? What the hell?" Michael hissed. "Michael?" One of his co-workers, a sweet elderly woman named Barb, appeared at the end of the aisle. Barb worked at the help desk. She probably heard the racket he'd made when he dropped the books. "Are you all right, dear?" "Fine. Just lost my balance," he explained. He saw Brink smirking out of the corner of his eye. "You weren't dizzy, were you?" Barb asked. "No, nothing like that. I just misstepped." "Are you sure? You look a little pale. You are eating enough, aren't you?" Barb's abundance of concern reminded Michael of Kate and the way she worried about Gavin. He hoped he wasn't scowling as he replied, "I'm okay, Barb. Thanks." "That was smooth," Brink remarked once Barb had returned to her desk. Michael glared at him. "What? How many times have I told you not to drop in on me like that? Especially when I'm at work?" "Hey, you might want to keep your voice down. This is a library," Brink patronized in a hushed voice. Michael felt like punching him. Unfortunately, his fist would fly right through Brink's smug grin and into the shelf behind it. Turning his back on his friend, he stooped down to collect the fallen books and climbed back onto the stool. "Wait a minute. Aren't you going to ask me why I'm here?" Brink asked. Michael ignored him. "Oh, that's nice. Pretend you don't hear me. Now I know how all the other ghosts feel." Michael cast him a sidelong glance. "That's a little better. At least it's a form of acknowledgement." "What do you want?" Michael whispered. "I wanted to talk to you. You've been so engrossed in your personal melodrama that you barely said a word to me all week." "My what?" "Don't pretend like you don't know what I'm talking about." "I don't know what you're talking about," Michael told him, stepping down off the stool which he collected in one hand. With the other hand, he pushed the cart full of books to be shelved down the aisle. "You, being all mopey since you came home from that party the other night?" "Really? You're bringing this up now?" "Well, whenever I try to talk to you at home, you'd shrug it off and tell me everything was fine." "Everything is fine." "Right. Because it's totally normal for you to spend your weekend binge-watching the Pride and Prejudice miniseries." "When did I watch Pride and Prejudice?" Michael asked. "Sunday morning, and then again on Sunday evening because, God bless A&E, they decided to show it twice." Brink scowled at his friend, as though it was his fault he'd been forced to sit through 12 hours of Austen television. Which, in hindsight, it kind of was. But still. "You were so distracted that you didn't even realize what was on. I wanted to change the channel, but, kinda need a body for that." "I thought you finally got the hang of that." "It comes and goes. Don't change the subject. What's bothering you?" "Nothing." "I'm going to possess the librarian if you don't tell me." "Go ahead. I'm sure a ghost who can't figure out how to work a television will have no problem with a full-blown possession." "That hurts, bro."
But seriously, does this have to do with the cute neighbor girl?
No, Michael lied, taking a stack of books and placing them back onto the shelf.
So you had nothing to do with that gnarly black eye she's rocking?
How did you... Oh no. Brink, please tell me.
Who's he talking to?
A small voice behind him whispered.
I don't know.
Michael turned to see two small girls staring at him from one of the kiddie tables. He averted his gaze and pushed his cart around a corner and out of their line of vision.
See? This is why I tell you not to bother me at work. Oh, like anyone will believe what those kids have to say?
Brink, did you spy on Kate and Gavin?
Yes,
Brink answered shamelessly.
What's the big deal? I spy on all the neighbors.
Well, don't.
Why not? They can't see me. Besides, how is spying any worse than spending God knows how long Googling her?
He had a point. Not that Michael would ever admit it.
That was different.
Right, Brink deadpanned.
Well, in that case, I guess I'll just go. I was going to tell you that she seems just as miserable as you are, and maybe you should call her or something, but I'm sure you don't want to hear it. You know, since spying is so wrong and everything.
Wait a minute. Michael turned to look at his friend.
Yes?
Brink smirked. Michael knew he was playing right into his hand, but for once, he didn't care. You think she's upset because of me? He asked. Brink nodded. Why?
Let's review, shall we? Cute girl next door invites you to a party. Although you don't want to admit it, you like this girl, so you go to the party like the sucker you are. There, you inevitably make a fool of yourself, accidentally give her a black eye, and knowing you, run off in order to avoid any sort of confrontation that might involve actual feelings. On top of that, you make no attempt whatsoever to contact her in the days that follow. That's a lot of mixed signals on your end, especially if she likes you too.
Brink had tried to offer Michael dating advice in the past, but it was usually something juvenile, like, pretend you're not really into her, chicks love that. He was also usually wrong. This time, however, he sort of made sense. You think I hurt her feelings? Michael asked.
I think you're afraid of getting close to people, and because of that, yeah, you end up hurting them. Especially when they have no idea why you're pushing them away.
But it's for the best, Michael argued.
For them or for you? Brink asked. I think you underestimate people. I mean, yeah, if you come up to me while I was alive and told me that you could talk to ghosts, I'd have thought you were a little crazy. But if you could prove it, man, I'd have thought that was just so cool.
You still think that your cartilage piercing is cool, Michael countered.
It's not my fault you can't appreciate my sublime fashion sense. I'm just trying to help you out. You know, you might not have the greatest people skills and your hair could use a trim, but you're a good guy. You deserve some happiness. You just need to learn how to trust.
Michael was fully prepared to argue that trust wasn't the issue when Barb poked her head around the corner of the shelf.
Michael, dear, after you've finished, I need you to fetch a box or two from downstairs, she told him.
Okay, Michael replied. Barb smiled at him and shuffled back to the help desk. Michael glanced back to where Brink had been standing, only to be met with shelves of dusty books. His friend was nowhere to be seen. Chapter 6. It was only Wednesday, but the way the week was dragging, Kate felt she should already be well into the following Monday. Work wasn't going well. Their most recent client, a woman who had hired Val and her team to decorate her house for an anniversary party, was an absolute pain. Her request for her house had been very specific, but after Val, Kate, and a few other members of the team had spent a substantial amount of time and money meeting her numerous demands, she changed her mind and refused to pay Val extra for her troubles or the wasted materials. On top of that, Gavin's health had been steadily declining ever since Friday night. Kate blamed herself. If the party hadn't been overexertion, then her waking him up in the middle of the night so he could investigate some imaginary presence had certainly done the trick. They'd spent Sunday afternoon with their parents, but Gavin had been so ill and exhausted that Kate hadn't seen much of him since. With all of that on her plate, She shouldn't have had the time or energy to think about how Michael had made no attempt to contact her at all. She told herself that she was being irrational, that she had no reason to expect him to contact her. It wasn't like they were dating or anything, but she hoped he'd at least considered her a friend. And wouldn't a friend have texted her to ask how she was feeling after being pummeled by a volleyball? Feeling drained and bitter, she pulled into her driveway and turned off her car. She probably should have gone to the grocery store, but she simply wasn't in the mood. Climbing out of her car, she was so wrapped up in her own thoughts that she almost missed the young woman storming out of the apartment directly below hers. "I don't care, Billy. I'm telling you, I've had it with this apartment." With that, she slammed the door behind her and began rummaging through her purse. She pulled out her sunglasses and turned her eyes forward. Only then did she notice Kate. "Oh, hello." "Hi," Kate replied, feeling awkward for having been caught eavesdropping. "You look familiar. Did you just move in?" "Yeah, about 2 weeks ago." "Well, do yourself a favor and don't renew your lease. I've only lived here for 4 months, and let me tell you, it's been a nightmare." "What's wrong with it?" "You haven't noticed?" Kate shook her head. "Well, I guess you really haven't been here that long. I suppose you work during the day?" "Yes, but my brother's taking some time off, so he's been here." "Well, he must be pretty unobservant if he hasn't said anything to you. This building is cursed." "Cursed? How so?" "I have not lived here one day where something hasn't gone wrong. The lights flicker, the thermostat never works, I have problems with my television, and now I'm getting absolutely no cell phone reception." Kate was surprised. She hadn't encountered any such problems. "Have you reported all of this to management?" "Of course, but every time they come by to inspect, they tell us there's nothing wrong." "Sounds familiar," Kate mused. She may not have had the technical difficulties her new neighbor described, but something was definitely not right with Gavin. Of course, that had been going on since before they'd even discovered the Riverview apartment complex. "What do you think it could be?" "I told you, the building is cursed. Neighbors across the hall warned us before we moved in, and we didn't listen. And you know, it's more than just the technical stuff." "What do you mean?" "Strange things happen here," the woman told her in a hushed voice, almost like she was trying to avoid being overheard. "Objects will disappear and turn up days later in places you'd never think to look. Just last week, I thought I'd misplaced my curling iron. I found it inside our china cabinet. Or you'll hear noises, unexplained things like somebody tapping on the walls, even though you're alone in the apartment, or footsteps pacing around an empty room." As she spoke, Kate felt shivers run down her spine. "You've heard them, haven't you?" "I thought I was just imagining them," Kate confessed. "My brother thinks I'm crazy. We even had a fight about it." "My husband has heard them, but he doesn't want to believe it. Men are kind of funny about things that can't be rationally explained. It makes their feeble little minds short-circuit." "I guess that's why Michael never said anything about the building being cursed." "Who?" the woman asked. "Michael Sinclair. He lives across the hall from me in 1723. The woman's eyes widened with surprise. "You actually talked to him?" "Yeah, he's a really nice guy." "He didn't seem off to you?" "Off?" Kate wondered. Perhaps in the sense that one minute he acted like he liked her, and the next he was out the door. But he'd never struck her as strange. "No, not at all," she replied. "Why do you ask?" The woman shrugged. "I don't know. He's always sort of kept to himself, and, well..." "What?" "Look, I know he's your friend, but there have been rumors about him." Kate's mind spun with curiosity. "Like what?" she asked. "Like he may be behind the strange things that happen in this building?" "Michael?" Kate asked. "How? That's impossible." "Well, according to Mrs. Riggs, out of all the tenants in this building, he's the only one who never reports anything suspicious." "And because of that, she thinks he's the cause of it?" "It's not just that. The building wasn't always cursed. Apparently all of this started about 5 years ago, right after he moved in." "It just doesn't make sense," Kate said, glancing upstairs at Michael's front door. "Michael's just a nice, normal guy."
How could he be responsible for power failures? I don't know. All I do know is that I am out of here as soon as our lease is up. And I'd encourage you to do the same. Kate. She held out her hand, feeling foolish for not introducing herself sooner. Elise. I'm sorry we didn't meet under more positive circumstances. That's all right. It fits right into the theme of how this week is going so far, Kate replied dryly. Elise actually grinned. Well, I wish you luck. I'm off to gripe at management, yet again. In that case, good luck to you too. And listen, I'm not trying to ruin your friendship or tell you what to do, but be careful around that guy upstairs. He's probably nice and normal, like you say, but better safe than sorry, Elise advised. Thanks. I'll keep that in mind, Kate answered half-heartedly, as Elise turned her heel and walked briskly in the direction of the complex offices. Kate, on the other hand, began her trek upstairs to her apartment. She didn't want to believe anything negative she'd heard about Michael. Then again, the more she thought about it, the more she realized how little she actually knew about him. He hadn't told her anything about his personal life, claiming that there wasn't much to tell. But even if he was a little socially awkward, how could he possibly be responsible for all the things Elise had mentioned? The mysterious footsteps, for instance. It was comforting to know that someone else had heard them too. It should have been even more comforting to know that whatever was up in her apartment had come with the building. Except it hadn't. Not in their case, anyway. The building might have been cursed, but whatever was with them in that apartment had followed them there. And Kate had a horrible feeling that it intended to stay. So, Kate, listen, I was wondering. Kate, hi. Your face looks a lot better. Hey, sorry I haven't called. It's been hectic at the library. As lame as the words sounded inside his head, it was nothing compared to how pathetic they all sounded out loud. Now, as Michael climbed the stairs to his and Kate's apartments, he had no idea what he was supposed to say. He still wasn't completely sold on the idea of speaking to her at all, really. He had spent the whole afternoon thinking about what Brink had said, and misplacing books on the shelves as a result. He'd had to go back and check to make sure they were all cataloged properly at least half a dozen times. It was true that he'd been a little distracted ever since the night of Gavin's birthday party. Well, technically ever since Kate and Gavin moved in across the hall, but he wouldn't say he'd been moping. The entire situation was more confusing to him than anything. Why couldn't he just get Kate Avery out of his head? Because, Brink's voice answered inside his mind, you like her, no matter how much you want to deny it. It was true. He'd love to be able to say he didn't have feelings for Kate, that she was just another neighbor to him, friendly in passing, but not much more. But he did, and she wasn't. She was bright, funny, understanding, and compassionate, if perhaps a little overprotective. It was hard to imagine anyone not liking her. Maybe that's why the ghost has been hanging around them so long, he thought with a wry grin as he crossed the landing to her apartment. Still unsure of what he was going to say, he took a deep breath and knocked on the door. He stood there for what seemed like a century, tapping his fingers nervously against his leg. Finally, he heard footsteps approaching the front door. Seconds later, the latch on the lock clicked and the door creaked open. Maybe it was because he was nervous, or because he was finally willing to acknowledge his feelings. But somehow, Kate looked prettier than he remembered, even in spite of the slight bruising that lingered where the volleyball had struck her. Her hair was pulled up in a loose bun, with a few stray strands falling into her eyes, and she was dressed in a white blouse and yellow skirt. Her eyes, however, seemed more reserved than usual. Maybe she'd had a long week too. Hey, Michael offered. How's it going? Okay, she replied, sounding like she wondered if he'd really just shown up to make small talk. How's it going with you? Not bad. Life at the library is, kind of hectic. Stupid, he scolded himself. Kate didn't seem to notice. Yeah, we've been pretty busy too. Her answer was casual enough, but Michael knew he wasn't imagining the distance in her voice. Maybe Brink was right. Maybe he had hurt her feelings. Well, listen, if you're not doing anything, and, if you want to, I was wondering if you wanted to go out tonight? Maybe get something to eat? God, he really needed lessons on how to talk to girls. Oh, Michael, that sounds like fun, but I probably need to stay in tonight. Val has me perusing the internet for some fancy antique candelabra for our newest client. Maybe some other time? Michael wasn't sure if she meant it or not. She sounded sincere, but he had dated enough to know that maybe some other time often translated to thanks but no thanks. Yeah, absolutely, Michael told her, trying his best to sound nonchalant. Well, good luck tonight. Thanks, I'll need it, Kate replied with a small smile. Bye. Bye, Michael murmured as Kate shut the door. Feeling like a total idiot, he turned and walked back to his own apartment. Who was at the door? Gavin asked, emerging from his bedroom with tousled hair and dark circles under his eyes. Michael, Kate replied without tearing her eyes away from her laptop. It was somewhat true what she told him. She really did plan on spending the rest of the evening doing research on the internet. However, it had nothing to do with Valerie or their fickle client and her stupid antiques. Meanwhile, Gavin meandered into the kitchen and pulled the milk out of the refrigerator. What did he want? He asked, taking a long swig straight out of the carton. How many times have I asked you not to do that? It's disgusting, Kate griped. Gavin ignored her and took another drink. Kate rolled her eyes and turned her attention back to her computer. So, you're not going to answer my question? Gavin asked. What question? What did Michael want? Oh, that. He was just wondering how we were doing. It was, of course, just her luck that the guy she'd been thinking about all week would ask her out on the day she discovers everyone else in the building believes he's somehow linked to all the creepy things that happen there. If it had just been Elise, that would be one thing. Kate could easily overlook the suspicions of one person who, to be honest, had seemed a little frazzled. Even her hair, the same color as the Weasley kids in the Harry Potter movies, stuck out at odd angles, like she'd run her hands through it one too many times, probably out of frustration. But it wasn't just Elise. 30 minutes of Googling had disclosed dozens of reports and news articles about the curse of the Riverview Apartments Building 17. Most of the reports were the articles only found on local news sites, the kind that are normally read by a grand total of 10 people, if that. But they told her what she needed to know. Nearly everyone who had lived in the building had, at one point, complained of technical difficulties, unexplained noises, and even some mysterious ailments. Mrs. Riggs had been quoted in a few, each time disputing claims of the curse. There is not, nor has there ever been, anything malicious or dangerous about Building 17. Here at Riverview, we believe in putting our residents first, and we'd never rent out an apartment that we believe to be anything less than suitable for comfortable habitation. Reading her words, Kate couldn't help but recall the enthusiasm with which Mrs. Riggs had presented the apartment. She recalled thinking that the old woman had been a little overambitious in her attempt to convince them that apartment 1724 was the home they'd been searching for. She'd even offered them a discount on rent. It wasn't the nicest apartment they'd visited, but it was the best deal they could find. In the end, that was why they'd chosen Riverview. Now it all seemed incredibly suspicious. So what, you didn't invite him in or anything? Gavin asked. I thought you liked him. I do, but I'm busy, and you've been sick, so I figured it was best for everyone involved to just have a low-key kind of night. We have low-key kind of nights every night. And weren't you complaining just the other day about your lack of a social life? I wasn't complaining. I was commenting. That was bull. She'd totally been complaining. But at the time, it seemed justified. Most of her friends were either engaged or married, and the ones who weren't worked more than she did. Yeah, she'd had fun at the party last week,
but the one guy she'd really looked forward to getting to know had since decided to ignore her. Well, until tonight, anyway. Right, Gavin remarked and sat down next to her on the couch. Wait, the TV's not on? Are you feeling okay? He asked and pressed a cold hand against her forehead. She swatted him away. Stop. Is something bothering you, Kate? Yeah, you. I'm serious. What's on your mind? Kate hesitated. She desperately wanted to talk to someone about her encounter with Elise and what she'd learned about the building's strange history. However, knowing how Gavin would react, she may have been better off keeping her thoughts and ponderings to herself. It's nothing really, she began, choosing her words slowly and carefully. I was just talking to our downstairs neighbor earlier this afternoon. It turns out that she and a lot of other people who've lived here think that the building is cursed. Gavin stared at her for what seemed like a full minute. I knew I shouldn't have told him. Cursed? How? He finally asked. She wished he could ask the question without sounding like he was humoring her. Well, for Elise, it's mostly been technical stuff and strange noises. But a lot of other people have had problems with things going missing, temperature fluctuations. One lady even said that they couldn't have friends over because every time she had a guest, they'd end up getting sick. But she never got sick. Kate, you're not seriously trying to tell me you believe in curses now. Everyone else who's lived here certainly seems to, Kate argued. So what? Because a few people had problems with their lights, you actually believe there's a curse on this building? I don't know what to think, Gavin, Kate snapped, surprised by how irritated she suddenly felt. All I know is that strange things have been happening for months now, and I, for one, would love to know why. Maybe you don't care why you're sick all the time, but I do, and right now I will take any explanation that I can get. Kate closed her eyes and pressed the heel of her palm against her forehead. Kate, I'm sorry. Is your head okay? My head is fine. I'm just frustrated, she muttered. I want to know why you can't get better. I mean, even having a theory would be better than no clue at all. Yeah, but a theory that can't possibly be proven is just as useless as no clue at all. Come on, Kate, you're smart. Ish. Smart enough to know at least that there are no such thing as curses. Kate knew he was trying to lighten things up, but she wasn't in the mood to joke around. Instead, she ignored him and resumed her internet browsing. Gavin, realizing she wasn't going to meet him halfway, sighed and said, I'm gonna heat up the leftover Chinese for dinner. Do you want any? No, Kate replied. Right, I forgot. You don't eat leftovers. Kate glared at him as he stood and made his way into the kitchen. An hour later, she was about ready to give up the search. She wasn't really finding anything she hadn't already read. In fact, she was beginning to read the same articles over and over again. It was interesting, but unfortunately, she hadn't found any sort of answers or closure. If anything, she felt more confused. As she was about to exit out of the browser, however, one of the page's recommended articles caught her eye. Riverview Spectre. Local woman reports encounter with full-bodied apparition residing inside cursed apartment. Kate could feel her curiosity spiking as she clicked on the link. It opened to reveal a short article, a lot like the one she'd read earlier. Miss Marjorie Hampton of Dallas didn't believe in the supernatural before she moved to the Riverview apartment complex located in North Dallas. However, a meeting with a ghostly entity quickly changed her mind. I was in the kitchen making dinner for my 2 boys when suddenly I heard a noise like someone banging on the wall, coming from my bedroom. At first I thought it was the boys, but then I noticed that they were both in the living room glued to the television. I heard the noise again, so I grabbed a steak knife from the kitchen and went to investigate. I flipped on the light in the bedroom and that's when I saw her. She was standing in the middle of the room, staring straight at me. She opened her mouth like she was going to say something, but then she just vanished. Mrs. Hampton moved her family out of the apartment later that week, though she continued to pay rent up until her lease expired. I didn't want bad credit, she says. Building 17 of the Riverview apartment complex is notorious for the curse. which residents claim is the cause of a variety of technical problems and unexplained illnesses associated with the building. However, the current tenants of Mrs. Hampton's old apartment have reported no such difficulties. Kate's mind was reeling.
I knew it.
She spoke mostly to herself. Knew what? Gavin asked, sounding remarkably uninterested.
This article. Look, this lady said she saw an apparition here in this building.
Kate leapt up off the couch and carried her laptop over to the kitchen table, where Gavin sat with his own computer. What?
You were right. It's not a curse. It's a haunting. I told you.
Kate, are you serious? Gavin groaned. I thought we talked about this.
But it makes sense. On cemetery tours, they always talk about—
Please, do not start quoting that crap to me. If you want to convince me of anything, those clowns are the last people you should be referencing.
But they talk about how ghosts use energy in order to manifest and make noises and stuff. That would explain everything. It would explain why you've been sick for so long.
You think a ghost is making me sick? Gavin deadpanned.
Well, the doctors can't seem to come up with anything else.
Kate, this is the last time I'm going to have this conversation with you. There are no ghosts. There are no curses.
You don't know that.
Everyone knows that.
Why are you getting so defensive? Kate demanded. You never used to get this upset before, and I came to you with some pretty ridiculous stuff.
Because the last time you were this fixated on something, you were 9 years old. You're an adult now, Kate.
I know that.
Well, you sure as hell don't act like it. For a split second, Kate wanted to hit him, but she knew that wouldn't do either of them any good. Gavin must have seen how angry he'd made her because he sighed and held his hands up in mock defense. Okay, you want to settle this? He cupped his hands around his mouth and called out in a loud voice. If there are any ghosts in this apartment, we are asking you to show yourself. Give us some sort of sign. Rattle the windows, open the cupboards. Anything will do. They stood in silence for a few seconds. Kate strained her ears for a creak, a footstep, anything. But there was nothing. Gavin rested his hands on his hips. Well, look at that. Guess there's no one here after all. Unable to stomach the condescending smirk on her brother's face, Kate closed her laptop and retreated into the bathroom for a long, hot shower. Maybe if she was lucky, Gavin would get abducted by aliens before she finished drying her hair.